Vice President Mike Pence is threatening North Korea with the toughest sanctions ever. He says Washington will continue pressuring Pyongyang until it abandons its nuclear and ballistic missile programs.
He made the announcement in Japan after meeting with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe ahead of the Winter Olympic Games in South Korea. Ben Tracy is there with the latest.
Vice President Mike Pence arrives here on Friday for the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, and just 2 days ago he said that a meeting with North Korean officials here at the Games could be possible. That now seems less likely after his tough talk in Tokyo.
We will not allow North Korean propaganda to hijack the message and imagery of the Olympic Games.
While announcing a new round of sanctions, Vice President Pence did not leave much room for Olympic diplomacy with North Korea.
That North Korea is the most tyrannical and oppressive regime on the planet.
Just before Pence spoke, North Korea announced it was sending Kim Jong-un's younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, to the Games in South Korea, the first person from the ruling family to cross the border. She's believed to be trusted by her brother and occupies a high-ranking role in the regime's propaganda department. Sending her could be a sign of Kim Jong-un's seriousness about improving relations. But she may not receive a warm welcome. On Tuesday, protesters greeted a group of 140 North Korean performers when they arrived in South Korea.
North Korea is very dangerous, you know?
Their sign showing the crossed-out face of Kim Jong-un. South Korea has tried to reduce tensions ahead of the Olympics, getting the U.S. to agree to delay their joint military exercises and allowing North Korea's flag to fly at Olympic venues. But the insults are also flying again, with North Korean state media calling President Trump a lunatic and warning that America will, quote, go to hell if it attacks North Korea. John DeLury is an expert on Korean relations.
The key is you have to get the United States in the room with North Korea so that they can figure out what are some positive steps that can be taken. In the absence of that, the Olympics ends and we're back to fire and fury.
North Korea is planning to hold a military parade tomorrow in Pyongyang. U.S. officials say there doesn't seem to be any evidence that they're going to parade their missiles, which could be a small gesture to South Korea on the eve of the Olympic Games. Vlad and Anne-Marie.
Ben Tracy, thank you. For more on this now, we want to bring in CBS News senior global affairs contributor and president of the Eurasia Group, Ian Bremmer. Thanks for joining us, Ian.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're hearing from the Vice President Mike Pence. He's floating the idea of even more sanctions against North Korea. We heard from Rex Tillerson earlier, and he seemed to have suggested that maybe there could be a possibility of sideline talks between the U.S. and North Korea during the Olympics. But with the idea of further sanctions being floated as well, what are the odds of that happening?
There are a lot of North Koreans in town. So I think, the North Koreans right now are in diplomacy mode. I think if the Americans actually were to say, we'll have a sit down, even if it's really informal and there's no agenda, then the North Koreans would be wise to take that opportunity. Look, we do not have human intelligence on Kim Jong-un. We don't know at all how much latitude he has given the delegation and how they will respond to it. But given the fact that they are sending such a large delegation, including a political delegation and Kim Jong-un's sister, and it's the first time she's gone to South Korea.
Right.
This is a big deal.
Right.
And to be very clear, part of the reason they're doing this is a response to a tougher policy from Trump. I don't think they would have done this under Obama or under Bush. There is definitely the Chinese are doing more sanctions because of Trump. Definitely the North Koreans are taking this more seriously, but also there's more of a chance of war. And, you're taking the good with the bad on this.
I mean, the bad sounds really bad because we're talking about a country that has a limited nuclear capability, millions of South Koreans that would be affected if there's any kind of a military conflict with the United States. So I guess the question is the idea of a denuclearized North Korea even feasible at this point?
No, certainly not. And the question is it remotely thinkable that the United States, not just by threatening a preemptive military strike, but by engaging in one, the kind of thing we did to the Syrians, where the Syrians couldn't respond because they don't have any military capacity. Right. Could we get away with that with North Korea? And the answer, by the way, is we quite possibly could. But what's the chance that a lot of people get killed by doing that? Is it 2%? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? I can't think of an American president that would have wanted to risk that. but Trump perhaps might.
Because we've talked about this in the past. I mean, we're far enough away from North Korea, and I know that they have a limited strike capability to the United States, but the response from the United States would be so overwhelming that it would sort of negate whatever they attempt to do. But I do worry about South Koreans, the Japanese, other people in the region where they could very easily strike and kill millions.
Well, we have a couple 100,000 Americans, troops, their families, expats living in South Korea, and they're very much vulnerable to even conventional artillery strikes from North Korea. And again, our ability to have any certainty that the North Koreans wouldn't take those measures is zero. You got to understand, Kim Jong-un is an incredibly violent person, right? I mean, when he had his uncle killed with anti-aircraft fire in a stadium with members of his family, Kim Jong-un was there, like watching it. Right. So what we know is that he's built this nuclear capacity on the back of starving his people, putting them in camps, in labor camps, and massive human rights abuses that are unfathomable for an average American. And we know that he's been willing to actually execute members of his family. And so the idea that we could engage in military strikes and we think, well, he's not going to react to that. We just don't have any level of insight into how he might respond. We're rolling the dice. But the status quo, if we continue to just maintain tough sanctions, is that the North Koreans continue to develop nuclear capabilities, ICBM capabilities, cyber capabilities, which are threatening not just in the region, but increasingly to the United States as well. There are no good options here, and I think we need to recognize that.
And it seems like increasingly the U.S. is alone in this call for a complete denuclearization of North Korea, and that has to have an impact. So, you mentioned that the tough talk seems to have, is part of the reason why we're seeing this robust contingent at the Olympics. But with fewer countries backing the U.S. up on this demand that they get rid of their nuclear weapons, that has to also weaken the American position, I would think.
Yeah, people don't recognize just how much of a unifier Trump actually is, right? Which is that, I mean, in terms of the pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, literally every other country in the world opposes him on that. In terms of calling for denuclearization of North Korea, complete denuclearization. Literally every government in the world would rather he's not doing that, right? There are a number of these statements that, even though they don't necessarily comport with reality, the fact that Trump is saying them is weakening the American position. And so at the same time that his toughness has actually gotten results on North Korea in maybe moving towards a diplomatic breakthrough, it's also moved the South Koreans away from the United States. It's made them feel we need to find a way to engage. We need to work more with China. We need to open up to the North Koreans because this guy's scary. And he's not looking after our interests. He's not a traditional ally of ours. He's not long term. I mean, America First would work much better for the United States if it was strategic and it involved leading by example. But Trump's America First is actually much more tactical. It's much more short-term transactional, given his background in real estate, reality television. That's kind of his modus operandi. And he doesn't lead by example, which makes it harder for him to get other countries to say, I want to be aligned with this guy. And that's a real challenge for him.
Ian Bremmer, so great to always, I mean, we love talking to you. Thank you for coming by.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.